You might completely disagree with this sentiment, but I'm starting to form the impression that crypto and Cardano are actually going to have to go where they've always said they were going. I'm starting to think that crypto might actually have to try to become money again. If you're totally fine with crypto trying to be money again, as long as the damn price will just go up, or if you're finding value in these videos, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies DRep address and the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. Okay. Thank you for joining, everybody. That was amazing. That time the mic was actually muted right off the bat, but it wasn't the button. It was the software muting. Anyways, thank you to everybody for joining. Let's see who's here. Hilldog was first. Hilldog says, let's fucking go. Pucky Hawk is here. Whoa, I am alone. Freedom. Okay, fair enough. Hilldog says, steak with AOS. Thanks, Hilldog. Dino Wiggins says, Tinder. This is part of it. This is part of it. Hilldog is here. J. Marie is here. Yo. McCharles has been on fire. Let's go. We're actually going to listen to a little Charles clip. We seldom listen to clips or watch videos. We're actually going to watch a little bit of a Charles clip because I think what he said is so important. And it's a big piece of what I've been trying to communicate on this channel for years, basically, but especially over the course of the last 6 months. Hilldog says Midnight Mainnet will officially go live before the end of March. Ooh, sounds interesting. Sounds interesting. USDCX will be launched on Cardano by the end of February. I'm very curious to see what it looks like once it's on the ground. Like how many steps are we talking about to go from Coinbase to my wallet on Cardano? What exactly is going to happen? I'm very curious about that. D9U says engaged. Thank you. Fly for me says I'm back. I'm sixth. RealFi. Yep, very much in favor of RealFi. Rulo, hola, thank you for joining. Raz says afternoon, everyone. Hope all is well. Julian Konigsman is here. Says, hola, have you seen the Midnight City trailer? I have not. What is the Midnight City trailer? I'm very interested, though. Very interested. Sever Tom Cardiac says, cheers. Joe Davids is here. Missed yesterday, but I'm back today. Thank you for being back. Appreciate it. Otis Freechova says, ready for the CRR. Let's go. Let's go. Hilldog says, great intro. Thanks. Brown Raider says, woo, just in time. Let's go. Fast response time on the mute AOS. Yeah, it was because it was software this time. The physical button, I don't really notice because it's on the side of the mic and I can't see it. But this one was actually just somehow accidentally clicking the wrong button on the screen. So it was easy to notice. Omar Wright is here. Just got here. Let's go. Let's go. Brown Beardo says, how many steps? Have you heard of the Labyrinth? David Bowie is coming. I actually watched Labyrinth as a kid. It's kind of funny. I was just barely talking to somebody about Labyrinth a couple days ago. I've seen it, I think, once in my life when it came out in the 80s. I watched Labyrinth. And I was young enough that it was kind of I remember it being a little bit dark and scary. Labyrinth as a little kid, as a very small kid, it was a little bit scary, Labyrinth. But it's funny you mentioned, I was just barely talking to somebody about Labyrinth the other day. So here's where we're at. I think crypto has gone through these stages. We've talked about them many times. Oh, Otis Fricho says, man, I love that movie as a kid. Brown Bearder says it played on Disney Channel a lot. Oh, I couldn't figure out how so many people had seen it. I've never had the Disney Channel in my life, so I wasn't exposed to whatever was on the Disney Channel. But that explains why so many people have seen it. I knew that many people could not have seen it when it was originally available in the 80s, but that makes perfect sense. Pucky Hawk says Labyrinth was awesomely scary as a kid. Yeah, I still remember who was with me when I saw that as a kid for the first time, because we were kind of traumatized by the darkness of it. But I think crypto has gone through these phases, right? we've talked about them many times on this channel, so I won't rehash what I think went wrong or right with these different phases in crypto. But we sort of had Bitcoin, and then all of a sudden altcoins were a thing. Litecoin came along, and then all of a sudden Ethereum came along, and we had programmability and ICOs, and then ICOs were the big thing. And then it was like all of a sudden, oh, we've got all these different altcoins. Let's have DeFi. And DeFi was a really big thing. And then a lot of things spun out of DeFi. These were things like meme coins and, along came NFTs and all these different things. But DeFi was one of the biggest emerging properties of crypto. As soon as we had programmability, you could do DeFi. And DeFi has been this big, really big overarching trend in crypto for a long time. So I think we have, in a lot of ways, we've oversaturated the financial services thing. We've done like a little too much with financial services, right? Crypto came along, and the original promise of crypto was, hey, we're going to be a better money. The central bank money sucks. They always debase it. The Austrian economists were right. Hayek knew all along. Von Mises, they were right. Central banks are going to abuse the money. They've been doing it since, before Roman times, since the beginning of the existence of money. Whoever was issuing the money always abused that ability. Everybody knows it. Let's try to fix it. That was a great value prop for crypto. And then DeFi came along, and crypto was like, about that money thing. Instead, we're just going to do mini Wall Street stuff. We're going to try to mimic Wall Street, and that's what we're going to focus all of our goddamn energy on. We're going to give you every flavor of fake Wall Street we can. We're going to, tokenize voting rights in our little fake Wall Street platforms. We're going to give you every form of financial services you didn't know you wanted. And it's going to be so inventive. You're all going to cheer for us when we launch these platforms. But we're basically going to do that over and over and over again. Even when you already have 20 different types of automated market makers, we're still going to give you more automated market makers. We're just going to keep doing the DeFi thing. Once we give you a lending platform, we're just going to keep giving you additional lending platforms. If it exists in the EVM world and it doesn't in the UTXO world, we're just going to adapt everything over from the EVM world and call it a brand new invention and launch it on Cardano. This is what's going to happen over and over and over again. And you guys are going to eat it up because there might be a chance for even you, lowly plebes, to make some money. Let's see. Severed Tom Cardiac says, I saw it as a kid on VHS. Yep. I must have been messed up. It never scared me, says Otis Fricio. Fair enough. Matt says, aloha. Jay Coco's here. Cover equals joyous from Carta Station. So it could be. I know he's highly amused. I know he's amused by these by the thumbnails. But I thought it was a good way to represent all of us, right? So I often think back to, I believe it was it might have been the very first music video that played on MTV. I think the very first music video that played on MTV, I could be wrong, but either the very first or one of the first, was a song, and the lyrics of the song included this narrative that video killed the radio stars. This has always resonated with me because I realized the beautiful thing about radio was that you couldn't see the person singing. And it was really easy for anybody to relate to the person singing because you didn't look at the person and say, that person looks different than me. That person's from a different background or geography or group than me. You just heard their voice, and voices are pretty universal. You can associate with the words that are coming out of somebody's mouth. And maybe even more so when you can't see them, because all you hear are the ideas. There's certain things about their voice that allow you to do certain things about them. But largely, when you can't see the person, it's really easy to associate with them and to sort of take to heart the ideas that are being communicated by their voice because you can't see them. And so I thought, wouldn't it be great if the thumbnails, instead of having, somebody who people would look at and even subconsciously think to themselves, that person doesn't look like me. That person's from a different group than me, a different geography than me, a different nation state, a different, part of this social, different social strata than me, whatever. I thought, how do we present a character that could be anyone, a universal character in these thumbnails? And it occurred to me, the astronaut. Anybody could be an astronaut. Underneath this astronaut suit could be any type of person from anywhere on Earth. It could be anybody. This is like a universal character that anybody can associate with. So I was like, let's use the astronaut for a while. Let's let him be the avatar of all of us in Cardano. Any one of us could be inside that astronaut suit. That's where the astronaut came from. I love the fact that it is also Joyous Testimonies get up for all of the meetups, though. I love that part too. There's a trailer made by the Midnight Foundation showcasing a SimCity style game called Midnight City, showcasing the advantages of zero knowledge proofs. Very interesting. But okay. Thank you, Julian. Thank you for letting me know about this. I'm very interested. Very, very interested. Thank you. I'm going to check that out for sure. Probably tonight after this stream. Trolltol is here. Hello. Thanks for joining. Veggies. I thought this was a carnivore space. Yeah, so obviously I'm a carnivore. I do not eat any of the things the astronaut is perusing here. But I thought, you know what? We talk about carnivore stuff, occasionally. There's a lot of little segues into carnivorism. I thought, why not throw out, the wrong word, but throw a bone to the vegetable eaters and include some vegetables. So it wasn't part of the prompt, but everything that came up from the prompt included vegetables. So I thought, I'm not going to go out of my way to change this to meat. Obviously, I would prefer it be a bunch of steaks, but I thought, hey, we're trying to be universal with the astronaut. Why not allow the vegetable eaters to have one too? So here you go, vegetable eaters. I have included vegetables in a thumbnail. I got into crypto to leave the problems of TradFi behind, not evolve them to poison the well we just dug. This is how I feel. So what I'm getting at here is I think a lot of this has run its course. We've oversaturated the Wall Street Junior thing. Everybody in crypto has done the thing where they pretend like, they're a little miniature junior master of the financial universe thing. We've done this over and over and over again, right? We know what that looks like. We've done every flavor of that. Sure, will new types of platforms be invented? Will there be innovation? Sure, just like there is in the TradFi world. They'll keep inventing new ways to separate you from your cash, right? TradFi will keep inventing new ways to separate you from your cash, as will crypto. Crypto will keep inventing new. Oh, there we go. Pucky Hawk says, yep, that's the song. I was there. X-File Fletch says, the Buggles video killed the radio star. That's the one. Matt says, avocados. Fair enough. AI Enthusiast says, let's go. Brown Beardo says, you might call the astronaut an omnivore. Fancy that. I would prefer to think he's talking shit about the vegetables and he's a carnivore. But like I said, it's universal. You don't know. He could be a vegetable eater underneath there. Right? He can be whatever people want him to be. So if to me he's a carnivore, to other people he can be a vegetable eater. So, but good call. Good call. You can call him an omnivore if you want to. He can be whatever you want him to be. That's the point. That's definitely the point. But I think a lot of that has run its course. We've done that so much. We've oversaturated the financialization piece of crypto. Even in Cardano. I think Cardano is actually kind of resistant to it. We're like kind of the last ones. We're the least likely to do that to ourselves. But even Cardano has saturated the financialization thing. We've over-financialized crypto. We've over-financialized crypto. And this is something I've talked about a lot on this channel. We need to have DeFi. DeFi is important. You need to be able to do swaps. You need to be able to make loans. All these things. We need to be able to do them. But it shouldn't be everything, right? How much does Main Street suck if every establishment on Main Street is a fucking bank or a casino, right? If every establishment is a bank, a stockbroker, or a casino, Main Street kind of sucks, right? It's okay. The casino part is kind of fun, but It's not a very fun main street. You also need to have real commerce. You need to do other non-financial shit, right? The economy doesn't survive if it's all financialization. You need to have other shit in the economy. And that's what I think we need in crypto. We need other things besides just the financialization piece. Our Isaro Bargas says, good evening. Good evening. Thank you for joining. Appreciate you being here. So let's look at a little video from Charles. And we're actually, usually I just show you these kinds of posts with these kinds of videos and we just talk about it. But I think it's important to actually hear what Charles has to say. So let me know. I'm actually going to try to play a video for you. Actually play a video on the stream. You guys can let me know if the audio is not coming through for any reason. I think this time it might actually work, but here we go.
I want to get to a point where your Tinder runs on blockchain and you can prove properties of how tall you are and how much money you make and where you're at. And you can actually verify that the picture in the Tinder profile is real.
On Tinder.
Yeah, it's very important. But I want to get there, and I want to get to a point where all the video games run on it, and a point where all your Facebook and your other things run on this infrastructure. That's what's going to bring 2-3 billion people in, and that's what's going to change everything. And the consumer doesn't care about that there's a token at the end of the rainbow, there's a blockchain at the end of the rainbow. I don't have to care that there's TCP/IP in the internet. I don't have to care how electricity works. I just flip the switch and magically it works. We got to do that as an industry, and we got to stop over-financializing everything. Anytime I hear anything, I always ask, when's the token launch? And I'm sorry, 11 million tokens went out last year. It's not sustainable. Nothing is going to go to the moon. Get people in, solve real problems. The narrative will change.
So I think that's definitely the best advice I've ever heard for crypto as a whole. It's not even necessarily, specifically applicable to Cardano. It applies to all of crypto, right? Charles is right. We have way more tokens than we ever needed. We have way more DEXs. I'm putting words in his mouth now, but we have way more DEXs than we ever needed. We have plenty of loan platforms. We've done all the shit. Now we actually have to solve real problems. The reason why the over-financialization took place in the first place was because it was the easiest way for developers, for builders to make money. It was the most obvious way, right? It's like Cardano's launching programmability. What's the first goddamn thing we're going to do? DEXs, because it's the proven way for the builders to actually recoup, their monies. It's the best way to make money. So we've done all that. Charles is absolutely right. We've got to actually solve real problems. And it's not just that I just talked about crypto going back to being money. That's what crypto needs to do. The assets need to become money again. The blockchains need to solve real problems, right? The assets need to be money in the same way that Bitcoin needs to be able to be money. But the blockchains, especially the ones that allow enough expressiveness, like Ethereum and Cardano, they actually need to solve the problems, right? If it was just about being money, Bitcoin would be enough, right? We could all just trade Satoshis. That would be fine. The blockchains themselves, if expressiveness and programmability are to ever live up to, the dreams that launch them, they need to solve real problems, right? It's not so much about whether or not we put Tinder on the blockchain or we put video games on the blockchain, but we do need to do something. We do need to solve real problems. If the whole space is just about launching and swapping and lending assets that don't actually function as money, we're not really doing anything, right? This is just this weird, esoteric, fake Wall Street thing we're doing. Nobody really cares about that. Nobody in the mainstream is going to get excited about that. We've got to solve real problems, right? So I think Charles is giving the whole crypto space some advice here that if the whole space had taken it, we would probably be in a very different place years ago. In fact, I see people are saying exactly that in the comments. Crunch is here. Thank you for joining. Omar says too many games. Yep, too many games. I wish, in the sense that DeFi is basically a game. I wish the whole industry understood this obvious truth years ago. Exactly. If the entire space had understood this 5 years ago, and we had set all that energy that was put into just reiterating the same goddamn DeFi platforms over and over again, if we put all that energy into solving real problems. Instead of all the DeFi and all the meme coins that just kind of fueled more DeFi and all the NFTs and all the other stuff, if we tried to solve real problems, we'd probably be in a very, very different place today. Can we get back there? Yeah. We just have to build solutions to real problems. That's what we've got to do. We've got to treat crypto as what it was supposed to be, money, and we've got to treat blockchains as what they're supposed to be, engines for solving real problems. Instead, we treat crypto as like casino chips, crypto the assets as casino chips, and we treat blockchains as just TradFi rails, right? So we've got to make a big change here. Crunches says, as a billionaire, you'd think he could afford a hairbrush. Yeah, he's definitely not spending millions on hairbrushes, is he? He can wear a suit for starters. I don't know. I mean, the problem with suits is it's real easy to have uncool suits. So I think I'm happy. I'm happy with Charles in a hoodie and whatever kind of, Palmer Luckey-esque style shirt he wants to wear. I'm okay with this because the suit thing can go real wrong, right? A really nice suit can look great, right? A really nice suit looks really nice, but it's real easy for that to go wrong. And you end up looking like, I was about to say somebody's name, but it would ignite a bunch of controversy. So I'm okay with this look. Casual is probably better for our space, I think, because if everybody started wearing suits, there'd be a lot of very ugly suits out there. Make crypto work like Google. It just works. You don't have to know you're using a blockchain. Exactly. Charles says as much in this video. The dream has always been that everybody's grandma is using crypto and they don't know it. Just like TCP/IP, the analogy people always refer to. It's like your grandma doesn't need to know how the internet works. The important thing is that the internet does something that's valuable to your grandma. She doesn't need to know how it works. Same thing with crypto. And obviously, Charles is talking a lot here about zero knowledge technology, ways to prove things. His Tinder example is specifically around that, right? It's like you don't want to scan your passport or your driver's license and put it on your Tinder profile, but it would be nice if, you could prove you are who you claim to be. If we could cut through some of the, we'll call it dating fraud, on dating platforms like Tinder, that would be a solution to a real world problem, right? If you could cut through some of the fraud that goes on there, that would be a real solution that would have value to people. People would want to use the version of Tinder where people can prove things without having to give up data they don't want to give up, right? So obviously he's talking about midnight a lot here, but this goes for all of crypto. We've just got to do real shit. I think one of the big themes of this channel since I emerged from the fiat mines back in October has been, we got to do real shit again. I think this is an acknowledgement that probably the whole space needs to do that. The whole space needs to do real shit again. And that really means solving real problems, providing real value. The value prop of crypto has sucked for like the last 5 years. What does crypto do? We need a simple answer to that question. Wish we could point to a killer app. Yep, we need a killer app. We do. Zero knowledge proofs might provide that. Charles is kind of talking about that right here. He's talking about something that zero knowledge proofs can do that almost nothing else can do, right? It's like the example he gives is, how do you prove your height? How do you prove you are exactly the height you are without giving up a bunch of other information you don't want to give up, right? It's like you could scan your passport or your driver's license, right? Obviously that could be digitally manipulated, but you don't want to give up that much data. You just want to prove you're that tall, or prove you have a real career or a job, or prove you actually live in this city, prove you actually live in Chicago and you're not a scammer who lives halfway around the world, right? That's a better example. Maybe you need to prove that you're not somebody engaging in the lonely heart scams that abuse so many of our, especially elderly, these are valuable things. These are real things. Like that would actually be a killer app. if it could do that. And I believe zero knowledge proofs can do that right now. Midnight can do that. Midnight could really do that. Charles was on Cardano with Paul, and he elaborated the vision more fully. Okay, I'll check that out. Paul does really good videos. I like Paul's interviews because he actually lets his interview subjects talk. So I'll check that out. Thanks for alerting me to that. Did you see Elon is rolling out X money soon? I haven't seen the latest stuff on this, but we've kind of been speculating about Elon rolling out X money since his first money services business license in a state jurisdiction, which was like a couple years ago. I covered that the very first time it surfaced that he was applying for money services businesses licenses in the States. And we've also talked about it in the last month. I showed a list of all the states where X has money services businesses licenses. So it doesn't surprise me it's rolling out soon. I'll be curious to see like a real date. So Omar likes the colorful shirts. Yeah, it kind of fits Charles. Blue Mammal says it's real easy to have uncool suits. It's true. It's true. I'm trying not to call out any particular professions, but I'm trying really hard to not to name certain professions because I don't want to insult anybody. But it's really easy to look bad in a suit. It's really easy to wear the wrong kind of suit. Let me put it that way. Matt says he looks like a bum, homeless. Yeah, I mean, that's a little. I don't think he looks home. Okay. I mean, he looks a little scruffy, but the dude has just gone on a tour of Japan. Now he's in Hong Kong. So a lot of that's probably just traveling across Asia, probably not getting enough sleep, having to wake up and show up for stuff in a weird new time zone, all those kind of things. Does he look homeless? I don't think Charles really ever looks homeless. Homeless implies like, being dirty and, his hair is a little disheveled here, but homeless is probably not how I would describe him. I think we have more developers who are capitalists that merely want to build a better widget than their competitors instead of visionaries who have the grit to build new paradigms or verticals. Yeah, I think that's true. So most developers are going to be happy to build something that takes market share, whether it does anything innovative or not. They're going to be happy to build something and just take market share. I think that is the challenge for most people building something, right? Because if you're building something in crypto, you're already kind of on the innovative side of things. You're on the innovative side of the house already just because you're in crypto. So I think a lot of developers are like, well, if we can just get some market share and produce some revenue, that's good enough. But actually building something innovative is tough because if you build out a brand new type of thing, you basically have to prove out a whole new use case. Hell of a lot easier to just copy something that already exists and, create a slightly better UX, slightly better flow, like user flow, and still some market share. That's a hell of a lot easier than proving out a whole new use case for crypto, for sure. Proof of stake. Yeah, Trolltoll has something else he would like to prove with ZK proofs. Fair enough. Brown Beardo says it's not that they don't want to do real things. They don't have the skills to follow through. Yeah, I mean, it's not easy. It's not easy to innovate and come up with something brand new. And even if you have an idea that's innovative, like I've definitely sat in on conversations where people, not even in crypto, just in the non-crypto world, where somebody had some idea that sounded great. And literally somebody who was pretty successful at founding companies turned to them and was like, don't do new shit. don't do innovative shit. Just pick something that somebody's already proved out and do it better than them. Like I've heard that advice given non-ironically, right? The person was just like, literally don't innovate at all. Just engage in mimicry and figure out how to do it slightly better. I've definitely been in on those conversations. It's quite dismaying. Let's see. Ever been to a job interview, Charles? Okay. So Matt, you're making a good point now. Has Charles ever had a normal job? No, I don't think so. I mean, we know he worked on the Ron Paul campaign, and he said many times, famously, he said his only His only real boss was Ron Paul, right? So he worked on the Ron Paul campaign. I don't know if that was a job or a volunteer. I would guess that was, most jobs on campaigns like that are kind of volunteer. So who knows if he was actually paid or not, but has Charles ever had a real job? Question mark. I don't know the answer to that question. None that I know of. None that I know of. Speaking of ZK, just look at the drama about Discord right now. I wish SSIs were ready right now so we could get in on Discord. Yeah, we could have self-sovereign identity. That would be helpful. The Discord thing is crazy. It's kind of disrespectful to the interviewer. Yeah, I mean, I don't think, I think if Charles was trying to, if Charles was applying for a job, I don't think he would dress like this, right? What he's actually doing here is jumping on planes, flying to Japan, traveling all over Japan, flying to Hong Kong, going to a conference. I can guarantee you that there were many, many more disheveled haircuts in Hong Kong at Consensus than this one. this is probably considered, fairly controlled versus a lot of the hair that was going on. Think of what's his name, Alex Karp from Palantir. Right? There's Charles is not anywhere near that magnitude of hair. I'd rather my billionaires look homeless than an island goer, if you know what I mean. This is a good point too. I'll take the hair. I'll take the hair over showing up in a certain file. Pucky Hawk says that is my morning look. New moon on February 17th. Best time of month for the U.S. to move into Iran. Ooh, Tony Gam. Very interesting. February 17th is a new moon. Very interesting. Infinite Chaos says he's rich. He doesn't care. Pucky Hawk says needs coffee stat. That's my feeling. Can't say homeless anymore. It is unhoused. Experiencing unhousedness. How a ZK proves ownership of an object without scanning the legal document from real life. Not complaining. Want to understand it better. So we can we've talked about how zero knowledge proofs work in the past. How you can prove. I actually found a really great video. I found a really great video the other day that explains how zero knowledge proofs work in a new way. If I can find that video again, I'll come back and give you that explanation, because that one, I've tried to explain it before, and I know there's a certain percentage of people that aren't connecting with that approach to understanding it. I heard one that I think a lot more people will connect to. I'll have to go back and review that, and maybe we'll do it on the channel again. But I think that's going to become important to understand going forward. Matt says, I'm sorry, but I can't make excuses for Hoskinson anymore. He's representing our hard-earned investment. The developers on Cardano. Brad Garlinghouse was invited to the White House for pro look. Is that why he's invited, for his pro look? Omar says, try and get Zuckerberg to wear something other than a black t-shirt. Yeah, Zuckerberg is in combat sports now. I think we're stuck with black t-shirts forever. When is Charles coming to the show? Charles, someday we should do that. That'd be fun. We should do that someday for sure. Charles always, I just don't know what I would have to prepare for that, and I'd want to come up with exactly the right questions. Someday we'll work up to it. We'll work up to it someday. Brown Beardo, Charles always dons the mathematician hair, for better or worse. Very much so. Very much so. DIY 10Ks here. Thanks for joining. That's fine. Charles is on the show. I'd pay to have a DApp that filters out all these spam, scam airdrops on multiple chains. That'd be nice. Zuck is leaving. Yeah, we talked about it last night. Zuckerberg bought a waterfront place in Miami last night. And Chamath, we talked about Chamath's post where he pointed out that the taxable income in California due to the billionaire exodus has gone from 2.1 from billionaires down to 1.1 or something crazy like that. Yeah, it's crazy. Identifies as unhoused, has no evidence to prove it. Yeah. Okay, let's move on a little bit here. So speaking of Hong Kong, so I thought this was pretty interesting, right? I try not to pay too much attention to just like the pure marketing stuff that the various entities in our ecosystem are up to. But I do appreciate it when they create something that looks so pleasant. Look at this. Look at these colors. This is like the most cyberpunk little pavilion exhibit thing I've ever seen at any crypto conference ever. Look at how pleasant this is. All the blues and purples, just a touch of pink, a tiny touch of pink. I think people overdo it on the pink quite a bit, but all of this black and blue, this reminds me of like how I want my home screen to look most of the time. These are the soothing colors my, dark mode eyes, my dark mode seeking eyes want all the time. If I was at Consensus, I would want to go to this booth. Good job, Midnight. This looks great. This is exactly how I want crypto booths to look. Some people might not like this, but I like this very much. I like this very much. So Pucky Hawk says that is badass. That's what I thought. I was like, God damn, this is what the Cardano booth should look like all along. Every Cardano exhibit ever should have looked like this. Streetwise has got to say they're finally taking media seriously. Yeah, I mean, obviously the approach has been very different. And Midnight is a different kind of thing than Cardano ever was. Obviously it's got to be dark because it's called Midnight, so that helps. But Streetwise Troll Toll says looks like a chill place. Streetwise says they are learning. You can see the progression across each Japan tour event. Okay, that's good to know. I didn't know that. Same, pleasing to the eyes. Yeah, that's how I felt. It just looks like dark mode. I'm like, yes, please, God, please. Even the people associated with Midnight are wearing, dark mode style clothes. Totally approve. This is great. So good job, Midnight team. So looks like things are going well in Hong Kong. Severed Tom Cardiac says Lace and Atrium use those color schemes. Lace has got though. I mean, you can see in the Lace icons though. They've also got their like pink, their like kind of salmony pink color going on. So, but fair enough. Yeah, Lace is. I hope Lace just adopts this color scheme and gets rid of the like salmony pink. I wish they'd just go with this. That'd be even better. So we also got labor numbers. We also got employment numbers today. I watched a video, a little clip. It was Maria Bartiromo again, and she had a bunch of people on this huge panel. And they were sort of like getting the results live. So they started out talking, and then they got the results. A lot of you probably saw this, and everybody on the panel was sort of talking about how the employment numbers were going to suck, and that was going to be good for risk assets because then it would kind of lock in that the Fed was going to have to cut. And then they got the numbers right on her broadcast and read them out, and it was like way better than the expectations. They're all kind of shocked, and they're like, okay, actually the economy as far as the labor market's doing is way better than we thought. So we got much better employment numbers than the jobs numbers were way better than anybody expected, which is sort of good and bad, right? It's sort of a weird situation because we're in crypto, we're always kind of hoping for, not really like the Austrian economists in all of us are not hoping for this, but just like the crypto bag holders are sort of hoping for bad news, which means they're definitely going to debase the currency, which is going to make risk assets go crazy. Like we're going to have a flood of liquidity. But we got the good numbers, which, should make the Austrian economists in us happy because that means they won't do the bad central bank stuff that also coincidentally makes our bags get pumped. So here we are. We got good jobs numbers. Matt says Hoskinson did it to himself. He invited the drama into our house. He did it to us, calling all the competitors every name in the book, blaming Trump. Not cool. Yeah, I mean, Charles is people have different opinions on Charles. People can have good or bad opinions. I think the interesting thing about him, one of the most interesting things, is that everybody has an opinion for sure. I think they asked that Irish guy, community leader from the first couple of Japan tours. Now they have a lady that looks pretty serious. When I saw her, I thought it was Charles's girlfriend. So yeah, there's definitely some new faces. There's definitely some new faces in marketing for midnight. That's for sure. That's for sure. Um, so okay. So let's talk about some other sort of macro kind of topics. So here's one that, people, this is also kind of controversial, and I'll explain why. So this post says S&P 500 earnings yield is near 100-year lows. The only time it was lower was during the dot-com bubble. So this is all about PE ratio, right? This is kind of like the inverse. This is sort of like, the PE ratio is sort of price to earnings, and this is the earnings yield. So it's sort of like, where earnings are compared to the prices. So you can see during the dot-com bubble, which I lived through, I was kind of in college when the dot-com bubble was going down. So during the dot-com bubble, earnings were very low. And yes, prices for all those dot-com properties, all those companies that owned all those dot-coms, prices were very high during the bubble. And we were all running around. I remember in college, we were all having these debates like, how could that company be worth that amount? We don't even know how they're going to monetize these websites, right? Is there any revenue associated with owning this, highly touted website? We didn't even really understand how websites were going to be so valuable because, they existed, but there wasn't a lot of revenue being produced by a lot of these websites. We didn't have any of the big platforms yet. None of this was going on. So you can see that number is clear down here. And that's the only time in the last 100 years when earnings have been so low. Why is that going on? It's because we have a similar brand new phenomenon that's kind of world changing. It is not crypto. It is AI. It is AI. AI, we have these fantastic valuations, and same thing, the monetization and the revenue is going to have to catch up to the valuations. If you're an optimist, if you're not an optimist, you're going to say it's also what they describe this as here, a bubble, a bubble. So this is obviously indicating it's a bubble. So people down here are complaining about this. This guy says this chart has been making the rounds for 3 years. Earnings yield was near 100-year lows in 2021, 2023, and 2024. It's a valuation metric, not a timing indicator. Expensive markets can get more expensive. All of that is certainly true, but at the same time, we are familiar with this story when we know something's very important. The internet, dot coms, AI, crypto, and the valuations just go crazy. Even though we haven't quite figured out how the revenue is going to work, it does feel like we're in that position. Brown Beardo says, if that lady was romantically involved with Charles, you'd never see or hear her. Charles has always been very guarded about that kind of thing. That is very true. That is extremely true. It's wise, very wise of Charles to keep that part of his life private. I approve. I approve and agree with him on that, keeping that part of his life very private. I think that's the only way to go. I do not know who Tom Hopkins is. Please, I've heard the name before, but I don't know who that is. Please explain. Good morning, Dolph B. Wolf. Good morning. Oh, here we go. Spaceman is omni identity, not indicating all teeth, not indicating all teeth. Omnidentity. Builder of sales champions. His proven effective sales strategies have helped. Okay. Charles is live right now discussing midnight. Okay. Good to know. I'll probably go listen to that later. Simultaneously with this, we have, you can tell there's not enough going on in macro when you've got actually usually quite brilliant macro commentators like Lynn Alden. Lynn Alden is not dumb. Lynn Alden is very, very, very sharp. But there's not a lot going on in macro when Lynn, at least momentarily, there's like a momentary lull when Lynn Alden is saying things like this. She watched this video of Scott Bessent explaining how China and the US are rivals, and she described it like this. This comes off like a hostage video. China's exports are currently at an all-time high. This was Scott Bessent kind of explaining that the US and China are rivals, and how the US is kind of dealing with that. She elaborated a little bit down here. You'll recognize this scene from Office Space if you watched that fantastic movie back in the day. The US tariffed a lot of countries, then tried to soften them to build a coalition versus China, which failed. China is the largest global trading partner. True. Then we doubled down on most of those countries again while softening towards China, since China holds pretty strong cards. That's all pretty true. In a context where they could record this as often as they want, she's talking about this video, I believe. They could have recorded as many times as they want, and they still ended up with this, with this, when she describes as a hostage video. Scott Besson, I think, is a little bit prone to looking like a hostage because he's so controlled, right? I think he spent so long in finance that, he's just learned to be very, very controlled. And sometimes it comes off as anguish when I think he's not trying to seem anguished. But it is kind of the case in this video. Yeah, that's how I feel. Like the dude gives enough to this ecosystem. We do not need to know about his romantic life. There have been a few times where just sort of off the cuff, people have asked him in AMAs, and you can tell he answered really honestly. I'm thinking one particular time when somebody was like, "How's the love life going?" And he gave this like really honest answer without giving any details. He gave this like what you could tell was like a really honest answer about how it was going. But yeah, I agree. Guys like Charles, he gives us like every part of himself. I think he makes a wise decision by keeping all that private. I mean, and let's face it, do any of us really want to know about Charles's love life? I hope not. I hope nobody is like keenly interested in Charles's love life. Okay, James says, I'm getting smoked in the mines right now. Sorry, dude. I definitely did some very intense freelancing earlier today in the mines. I wasn't really in the mines, but I was freelancing, doing the same thing I do in the mines. And I was feeling the pain earlier today. Trust me, I was intensely feeling the pain. It was one of those deals where you get done and you're just like, fuck. Like you're glad you know how much money you just made. But at the same time, you're just like, fuck, man. Why do I have to do this? Matt says, Tom was my mentor early on. Marketing your business, Dress for Success looks like a success. I remember those books. I remember when the book Dress for Success was very popular. I remember that book well from back in the day. I even remember specific chapters in the book. Okay, here's another completely separate kind of topic, right? And I'm not co-signing this whole post, but I think there are some interesting points made here. One in particular, right? So this is about the NCL. You're going to see a lot of discussion about the NCL. You probably remember I'm always in favor of a lower NCL. I'm always in favor of a lower NCL. I want us to spend less. I've talked a lot about this. I don't want the treasury to zero out in the next 10 years. I think we should not do that, right? And this post makes a very important point in this regard. So he points out Cardano makes 10 million in actual network revenue per year. The reserves yearly injection into the treasury is not what it brings in from any sort of activity, ecosystem health, and participation. It is not revenue. So yeah, new NCL would be 10 million USD per year. So you'll hear people say, hey, the treasury brings in, 306 million ADA per year. That's just the inflation. Most of that is the inflation in the currency. That's us doing the central bank thing. That's just us spending money we printed. That's us doing the money printer thing. That's not actually revenue. So when people say, hey, shouldn't we be spending only the amount we're actually making, right? Like a balanced budget? The answer would be this. It would be the amount that's actually made, the actual revenue, right? I mean, we're even just talking about revenue, not even like profit, basically, but revenue. The actual revenue is this number. It's not the inflation number. The inflation number is money printing. That's the thing that we're also pissed about the central banks doing. So the real number is not 306 million ADA per year. It's this 10 million number, 10 million USD per year. So, the network makes money in transaction fees. here you go. There's that number. That is not the 306 million. So when we talk about a 300 million NCL, I'm in favor of it because it's basically a net change limit from February to a year from July. We just spent 350 in a much shorter amount of time. So I'm like, this is an improvement going down to 300. We just spent 350 in really like 6 months, 9 months, something like that, much less than a year, really, even though we kind of counted it as the whole year. We spent 350. So when they were like, hey, let's do an NCL of 300 that covers this period that's basically a year and a half, I was like, okay, the number went down and the time period got longer. So that's an improvement on both fronts. Of course, I was in favor of an even smaller NCL. A lot of you will remember when Jane, our friend Jane, an important part of the Cardano ecosystem, she proposed a very small NCL. What was like 200? I voted in favor of that, try to get people to rally around that. We couldn't get it passed. People wouldn't agree to such a small NCL of 200. I really, really appreciated Jane for putting that governance action forward and trying to get people to go for it. I certainly voted for it. Not enough other people did. So when I saw this 300 NCL, I was like, absolutely. But really, this point is the real point. The actual money we're bringing in is this amount. It's this amount. It's not that 306. That's all inflation. That's all just us printing money. So this is a really important point in my opinion. Brian Weirdo says, I think his brother and parents would be secret as well if they didn't have the collective dream of the clinic. Yeah. I mean, he's pretty disciplined about not talking about family, but he does mention that his brother and his dad are doctors, and he talks about getting homeschooled as a kid. I mean, the dude has given us a lot of information, obviously way more information than I would ever give, but he shared a lot more of himself than he even needed to. So no reason to demand more. James says, I can't wait to get home and retire in 2028 when ADA is around $10 to $16. Oh man. That is the kind of talk. That is the kind of talk of dreams. That is the stuff of dreams. Tom Hopkins, Tony Robbins, striking similarity. Yeah, the names are kind of similar, huh? I have no idea what Tom Hopkins looks like. I know what Tony Robbins looks like, but don't know what the other guy looks like. Okay, so I love to include stuff like this just to remember how nice it is to be in Cardano. So I thought this was a super funny post. Solana is down and no one is talking about it because no one uses the chain anymore. Solana network temporarily down. People are complaining about how this was a funny joke in 2022, but it's like, it's such an ongoing thing. It's good to remind yourself that this is, I don't even know if this is real or not, but it's good to remind yourself that they've built up such a strong reputation for their network going down and then turning a switch to turn it back on. It's good not to be, I would much rather be in Cardano. People talk shit about Cardano for various reasons. But I'm glad this is not one of them, right? I'm glad we're not the one that's known for going down so much to such an extent that people make a joke about it and no one even checks to see if it's real because it's happened so many times. So yeah, I didn't even check to see if it was real because it's basically just status quo. That Solana might be down on any given day. It's such a normal occurrence that I didn't even check. Yeah, Matt feels strongly. Matt feels strongly about his anti-hoodie stance, which is okay. I think it's okay to have that feeling. I think that's perfectly okay, Matt. Okay. Here's something else. We talk about demographics a bit on this channel. Obviously, I pay a lot of attention to the demographic spiral thing. It's very concerning. I'm on the Elon end of the scale on that one. I'm very concerned about the demographic crisis because it's like, I've even gone as far as to talk to professors who study demographics about this. And the thing they always lead with is no society has ever been able to turn this around. They always tell me there are no historical examples of anybody coming back from the kind of demographic problems all of the industrialized nations are facing right now, which is super concerning. And obviously, this is one of the big sort of boogeymen that Elon is always worried about. Like Elon was very worried about AI for a while. Obviously, he started, this gigantic EV company, so he's worried about, environmental issues. But one of the other things he's very worried about is demographics, right? Famously, he has had many kids himself. He encourages everybody to have many kids. But here we see every once in a while, you see the real world, this is kind of manifesting in the real world. So we've seen this for a long time in certain Asian countries. They are sort of getting ahead of it and offering all kinds of incentives for procreation kind of things. Here we see Macron. France is urging 29-year-olds to start families as birth rates plunge to their lowest level since 1918. Under a new government initiative, men and women will receive official letters warning that their fertility window is narrowing. The campaign is part of a broader effort to reverse the country's demographic decline. How much do you love that if you're a 29-year-old French guy and your girlfriend, your like live-in girlfriend, gets a letter from the government informing her that her fertility window is narrowing? This is the biggest like nation state player haterism I've ever seen. I would be pissed if I was a 29-year-old French guy trying not to get married to my girlfriend and she got a letter from the government letting her know that her fertility window is narrowing. This is player haterism at a nation state scale. So, I mean, I would do the same thing if I was the French government, but also I would hate it if I was the dude whose girlfriend got that letter. This is like terrible. Oh man. Oh yeah, this is pretty terrible. This is pretty terrible. But I'm afraid we're going to see a lot more of this. We're going to see a lot more crazy government programs to encourage people to have children. And I mean, obviously, you can also easily link this in your mind with a lot of the governments being so pro-immigration, even in ways that seem very dystopian, because they just can't. There's no way to reverse these population problems. Once you go below that, we talked about this recently, but whatever you think the replacement rate number is, whether it's 2.1 or 2.3 or whatever, once you go 2.6, whatever the hell it is, once you go below that number, it's very hard to find historical examples of companies being able to reverse that. So I think we're going to see a lot more of this kind of stuff. You always kind of see like the hyperbole in social media, like this country is paying single men to marry its women, kind of thing. And it's always so ridiculous. You can't quite believe it's true. But I think we're going to start seeing like real things. I think we're going to start seeing real things like this because all these countries are going to realize that what demographers and economists who look at demography have been saying forever, and that's that demographics are destiny. Once your demographics start getting screwed up, everything gets screwed up in the economy. And booming economies are always tied to booming demographics, right? It's like, why are the baby boomers so rich? Because they grew up in this time, literally we call it a baby boom because it was a demographic explosion when all the soldiers came back from World War II and everybody just had kids. You had this giant explosion in population and it produced the richest generation the world has ever seen, right? On the opposite end of the scale, when you run into this sexless generation, these younger generations we have now who are destined to have less sex than any generation ever before them, they're also going to produce fewer children, and you're going to run into the opposite problem. Instead of the riches of the baby boomers, you have the opposite. You have the opposite problem for this generation that's just not having kids. Okay, Severed Tom Cardiac says, tired of all this have kids rhetoric. Sorry, things did not work out for my wife and I, so we can't have kids, just nature. Don't like being made like feel like shit for that. No. I'm not taking a position on this. I'm not taking a position on this or saying that people should have kids. This is one of those times when I want to share details about myself with everybody, but I'm not saying that everybody should have kids. I'm just saying that we're going to see a lot of governments saying stuff like this. But trust me, I am the last one who would give you trouble about that. Tony Robbins kind of was boring sometimes. Okay. Poland seems capable of asking all the right difficult questions and making the right decisions for their benefit. Yeah, Poland is an outlier in a lot of ways. Yeah. Okay, you get it. Okay? I had a feeling you understood that it wasn't me saying it. So I think I read that correctly. I just want to make sure you knew it wasn't me saying it. But I get it. I'm with you. I understand what you're saying 100%. So I think we are going to see a lot of countries are going to get real worried as they realize what's going on with the demographics. So I'm actually okay with it. I think it is as bad as nation state leaders are realizing. It is actually that bad. I've already made my peace with it though. We're doing the opposite of a baby boomer generation for sure. Okay. On the IR front, on the international relations front. So we've still got this little mystery. The other day we had some combination of the White House and the Pentagon come out, and they strongly implied that a second U.S. carrier strike group would begin preparations to head toward the Middle East. This has been one of the big mysteries on the Persian Gulf situation right now, right? We've got the USS Abraham Lincoln in the Gulf of Oman, right? It's where it needs to be. During the 12-day war, when we struck the nuclear sites, we also had a second carrier group, right? It was in the Eastern Mediterranean, which means it can just go through the Suez Canal, and be in the Red Sea. Perfect positioning, exactly what you want if you're going to strike Iran. So the big question has been, are we really going to strike Iran if we only have one carrier strike group in the region? Is it really possible? Does it seem like we would do something that's like so many levels of escalation beyond what happened previously with fewer carrier strike groups? Seems very unlikely, right? But we've had the negotiating, which was very unserious, going on last week with promises for more serious negotiating this week. Yet everybody still feels like the negotiating diplomacy piece of this is just a bunch of bullshit, and everybody's just stalling for time so they can better prepare for what like a month ago seemed like inevitable kinetic conflict. So at this point, it's all kind of up in the air because the US has been pretty damn slow to get a second carrier strike group over there. And there's even debate. Everybody thinks it's going to be the George H.W. Bush, but they're doing their, Comp2X, which is like composite group exercises where they make sure the entire carrier strike group is working together the way it should. That normally would take a certain amount of time, and it's not up. It's still going on. They would not be prepared. So other people are speculating that it might be a different carrier strike group. At this point, we just don't know. But it definitely has this feeling like the U.S. is not in any position to do what has been subtly implied, throughout this entire ordeal. So I guess we'll see what's going on there. This post says, if a deployment order were issued today, it would still probably be mid-March before an East Coast-based carrier strike group could arrive on station. Even with truncated pre-deployment workout, that's the Comp2X, the ship would have to travel across the Atlantic to the Mediterranean Sea, or even further through the Suez to the Red Sea. Another carrier strike group with its embarked tactical aircraft and Aegis-equipped escorts. You guys know what the Aegis system is. That's the, like the USS Princeton, I believe, is a vessel with these kinds of Aegis capabilities. So they do all the super advanced radar stuff and other things. Would certainly bolster the forces massing in the region for a potential conflict with Iran. As we have frequently pointed out, there is not enough tactical air power there now for a major sustained operation. A second carrier strike group would provide a significant help. So this seems to make sense. This is all very weird. It's sort of like the US, is like half threatening to do something, but everybody kind of knows it wouldn't make any sense for them to actually do it. So this is all kind of confusing as to what's actually going on in the Persian Gulf, whether the US would actually want to do something or if they wouldn't, which makes me feel super bad for the people of Iran because while we're sort of concerned about horrible things happening with kind of with a certain number of people, the people of Iran have just suffered, the straight up murder in the streets of tens of thousands of people. And the things that are going on with the families of those people who got murdered are truly horrific. I almost showed a video of an Iranian husband and father describing what happened to his daughter and his wife. It's too horrible. I didn't even want to talk about it because it's too horrible. The things that happened to the daughter who was murdered and the horrible things that happened to the wife in the after. Yeah, horrible. I don't even want to talk about it. It's so dark. But to me, this is one of those times when the US could actually use its military might to do something good for the world, to free a people who are begging to be freed. Man, I hope the US does what it's capable of doing here. So like I said before, this could turn out bad whenever you unseat a regime like this that's been in power for so long. Things could go the wrong way. You could end up in this civil war kind of hellscape, but goddamn, such horrible things are happening over there right now. This is one of those times when the US could do something good. I hope we do it. Omar says, baby boomers had a government that worked for the benefit of the population up until LBJ and the Great Society. Since then, the Heritage Society has been planning government that works for the 1%. I mean, that's one take. That's one take, right? That's one take for sure. Iran got oil, meaning they need democracy immediately. That is true. That's one of the things that gives me hope. It's one of the things that gives me hope because let's face it, the US military tends to get involved if there's a lot of oil, and Iran has a hell of a lot of oil. So it gives me hope. For the record, I'd have all the kids I possibly could with as many women as possible if I was a billionaire or the government paid for the expenses. Yep, I'm with you on that. Yep. The problem is the cost. I'm 100% with you. Distraction. Charles is wearing his McDonald's uniform and is alive. No worries. I'm not going anywhere. Just got it queued up, right? Okay. I actually want to see this. Yes, Child was crushing it with that. Oh, Charles, why the hell say child? Because I was reading do not use want to impregnate the world. Charles's keynote have gotten way more dialed in across the Japan tour. Think it was all the warm up for the Daddy conference in Hong Kong. Oh, that's pretty good. Actually, that's a really good benefit. He got to practice with sort of a Cardano crowd all across Japan. Then he lands in Hong Kong and has this perfectly polished presentation. That's great. Okay. Matt likes Jack Keen. Fair enough. Hey guys, is there any good news today? I need some good news. Also need ADA back over 30 cents, please. I would say for the good news, I would say the best, probably whatever Charles is doing right now, that's probably the best place to find some good news. I would argue the thing we covered at the start of this video about Charles urging the entire crypto space to solve real problems, that's the real source of hope for me. If somebody were to ask me, what are you hopeful for crypto? I'm hopeful for that, us getting back to treating crypto as money, doing real commerce, and using blockchains to solve real problems, including zero knowledge proofs, right? I think that's the most hopeful thing for me in crypto. That's where the future lies. If there's a good future, I think that's where it lies. I hear Charles' tired analogy about intent-based commerce being like buying a latte. Yeah, that's been one of his big talking points lately, intense. He's like, it's all going to be intense. You're just going to declare your intent and then agents are going to take care of it for you. That might be right, but it's definitely his very frequent talking point lately. Mark Going says, just got to join. Have you all talked about Midnight City? Somebody brought it up. I haven't seen this trailer yet. AI agents working and all transactions on night. I have not seen this Midnight City thing. I'm looking forward to seeing it, but I haven't seen it yet. That was the intended strategy. I missed the start, but we'll re-listen later. I agree with Charles. I guess this bear market should flush out all the... Yeah, I mean, the good thing is we're kind of getting a clean slate. This has happened before in crypto. It's kind of one of the beautiful things about crypto is no matter how lame and abusive the narratives are, like meme coins, DeFi summer, people will be mad I said that, but DeFi summer, ICOs, NFTs, all of these different narrative trends that led to big abuses, all of those sort of we end up with they get washed away and we end up with a clean slate. So that's one of the nice things about crypto too. All right. I know everybody wants to go see Charles in a McDonald's uniform, and I do too. And we've covered all of our topics. So we will call it here. Let's see. Omar Wright says FDR through LBJ were good years to have kids in America. Yep. Well, then let me tell you about how to prove you are old enough to buy alcohol without a driver's license. There you go. That's a good zero knowledge proof use case. Got to have the conviction. Yep. All right, guys. I think we've covered all the news, and I know people want to get over and see Charles live. I'm also interested to see Charles in a McDonald's uniform. So we'll call it good here, but I hope everybody is having a good week. I hope you're looking forward to a good rest of the week, and I will talk to you soon.